Two things you have to know. You don't want to do this, and you don't want to do this. But you do want the boat to end up looking like this. This here is a 1973 20-foot Seacraft. The boat's been previously restored about 15 years ago, but now the deck's all peeling up and the rest of the paint is blistering all over the hull inside and out. Now the plan for this boat is basically to get it water ready so that it can be used for the rest of the summer and the fall into winter when it gets colder, and then blast the whole boat and respray it to clean up the entire hull inside and out. From what I've been told, a couple of things could be going on here. For the floor, most likely the reason it is popping up like this is that whenever the glass was originally put down on the floor when they redid it, because it was done on wood, either the wood was not wet out enough, and so when the glass was laid down on the resin, the wood sucked up most of the resin, leaving spots where there wasn't a good bond between the fiberglass and the wood deck, or that the wood was wet out but then it wasn't sanded between coats or too much time passed between the coats, which again leaves voids where the glass doesn't bond the way it's supposed to. Then for these blisters, these are actually where water has gotten into the paint or the gel coat, and just from sitting in the water all the time or from just a lot of use, the water gets behind the paint or the gel coat, and then when it warms up it tries to evaporate, which creates these blisters or bubbles here on the sides. Since there isn't anything wrong with the deck itself being made out of 3/4 inch plywood, it's plenty strong, just a little lumpy. For whatever reason that may be, the floor came out super wavy and they used a ton of filler to try and flatten it out. I'm not sure if this is a resin based filler or a form of Bondo, but it's just really thick in a lot of places, so it's starting to crack all over the transom area and the deck here in the back, as well as this cutout. And in order to resurface the deck, we'll be grinding all of this off the floor until we get down to the glass and the wood where we can get it decently flat, and then we'll cover the deck with another layer of matte before gel coating. You might also notice that around the console here, there aren't any screws holding the console down. It's been glassed over, which with the shaking of the console, it's making the glass crack around the console. So we'll be putting some biax or woven glass strips around this lip to reinforce it, as well as probably end up putting screws in the console to try and help prevent this from cracking again for a long time. Really, it shouldn't be glassed together at all, but what's been done has been done, so it's what we've got to work with. When it comes to doing a project like this, the biggest thing is preparation, because when you've got to grind and sand, you want to do it all at once. A couple of things about this too. If you can, you want to try and stay away from the corners and the edges.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine, and you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Curved edges and corners make the entire process a lot more tedious, and it takes a lot more time when it comes to the actual application of the glass. But the stages to this kind of project would theoretically go like this. First step is going to be to de-rig the entire project area of the boat. That means anywhere that you are going to be doing glass work needs to be de-rigged and cleaned up. The engine de-rigged, the steering hoses, all of the rigging needs to be taken out of the way and tucked away. All the deck hatches will need to be pulled off, the rub rails, cushions, and anything else that is in the area where you will be working. Then with a clean, ready area to work with, the next step is going to be the grinding and preparation stage. With the intent to do all the sanding at once, the best way to go about it is to start early in the morning and suit up. It's a crucial step when grinding fiberglass that you suit up. You don't want to be doing a project like this without having any kind of protection on.
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
That means a mask, long sleeves, pants, or a bodysuit, gloves, glasses, a hat of some kind, and closed shoes. This way you've got your entire body covered and protected before you start spraying fiberglass dust all over the place. You will also want to have fans going to direct and blow the dust away from you and in a general direction, like towards your neighbor's house when they have their windows open. You will also want to have an air hose around so that you can blow the dust off of you and off of the working area where you are grinding. By blowing the dust off, you can really see what's going on and whether you have the surface prepped the way you want it to be. By having your area prepped and ready to go with all of your tools in place, you can suit up and start early, allowing you to get all of the grinding and sanding done all at once. This way you won't have to get itchy again, because this is the nastiest part of the job, and when it comes to grinding, you can use any tool that you want to. Anything from a grinder to a belt sander. The biggest key is that when you have to eat through a lot of filler or surface area, you want to start with a 24 or 36 grit pad. This will eat quickly through the surface. Then you can finish it off with something like a sander with 60 grit on it, depending on the job that you're doing. For our Seacraft project, it didn't really go exactly as we've laid it out here in the first couple of steps, which is why we said theoretically, because you never know when you'll be in the middle of a project like this and a tropical storm comes rolling through to mess everything up. And seeing that a big portion of the deck was already ground out, the bare wood had to be coated with resin in order to keep it from soaking up the water when the storm came through. Because if water soaks into the wood, then the fiberglass will never adhere to it until the wood dries back out again. And this added some more grinding to the project, but it had to be done. Just like back here where the rigging tubes and the steering hoses were previously coming out of the middle of the deck. These holes had to be filled up, but because of how wet the back of the boat is when it's in the water, the wood was starting to rot out around where the holes were drilled, so they had to be enlarged in order to get rid of the rotting wood. So after cutting out a template and cutting out some pieces of Kusa to fill the holes with, they got a piece of fiberglass put on the back of them. Then once that was dried, they got put in the holes in the deck and glassed over the top of them as well, sealing up and filling the old holes where the rigging was coming out of the deck, causing a tripping hazard and just straight up taking up a lot of room from the back of the boat. After the area is all ground out and prepped out though, the next step is to clean it off completely before desuiting after grinding. Then you can lay out all of the fiberglass and get it all measured out and cut. I like to cut all the pieces and then lay them out on the deck or wherever they are going to go. This way you know that they are all going to fit, and then roll them up so that when you are applying the resin, you can roll them out into place. It's also nice to either number them with a marker, or you can simply lay them in position so that when you get to that spot, you can quickly grab the piece and lay it out, which is going to be the next step in actually applying the fiberglass to the floor. When doing big areas like this, it's always going to be easier with more than one person helping. This way you can have someone mixing up your next batch of resin and have two other people laying the glass where one person is wetting it out or applying the resin, and then someone else is coming behind them with what is called a rib roller in order to roll out all the air out of the glass as it's soaking up the resin. You want to mix up your batches in manageable buckets as well, like 1 or 2 quarts at a time, wetting out the area you're working on, laying the glass down, then soaking it with resin, and then rolling the air out of the glass, and just working your way down the line or glass that you have already measured, cut, rolled up, and laid out to allow you to just glass out the entire project at once. It's important to remember also that different types of glass are going to take the resin differently. Say the woven glass compared to the matte, or say the cloth compared to the woven. The woven will take a lot more resin to wet out, but once you've got everything wet out and all done, you just have to wait to move on to the next stage of the project depending on what you are trying to accomplish, which is the unfortunate event of having to do more sanding and prepping. But after doing another sanding and wiping down the surface with acetone, we can move into having an option of what we want to do next. We can either fair out the surface that we are working with, or we can apply gel coat or paint to the surface. For the deck, for more texture, we just apply gel coat, and gel coat is usually preferred on say a floor over paint. because it is thicker, which I guess you could say makes it more durable. But if you are working on, say, a gunnel or a vertical surface, it's usually nicer to go ahead and fair out the surface before painting or gel coating. The fairing fills in any voids and gives you that clean, smooth surface that you want your boat's sides to look like. And this can be done right over the glass if you do it quick enough. Like take this crack back here around the transom. After putting the glass on the crack to keep it from cracking again, you cover it with the filler, but at the same time making sure that the glass doesn't move on you. The filler is way easier to sand and it isn't as itchy as the actual fiberglass is. So making it a little thicker isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially when you are an amateur. It's easier to shape it out when you've got a good amount to work with. This way, once you've faired out your areas, you can sand them down to a nice finish before painting or gel coating. It's important to have an air compressor around though. That way you can blow off the area after you've sanded it, because there will usually be spots in the filler that will need to be filled again, depending on how smooth you want your surface to be. The air will blow out any dust that is covering up any of the holes. Now if you aren't fairing out the surface though, then you just skip that step and go ahead and put tape around wherever you are going to be gel coating. If you are spraying, then you'll need to cover up all the surrounding areas to keep any overspray from getting on the rest of the boat. But otherwise, if you are rolling it out, then just taping up your area to work in and mixing up the gel coat with the hardening agent that you are using that will kick off the gel coat depending on the brand you are using. We are using a polyester based resin and gel coat, so we are mixing in MEKP with the gel coat to kick it off. It's also important that if you are doing layers of gel coat, that the first layers are put on without wax or a sanding agent. If you put on gel coat with wax in it, then it will need to be sanded in between coats. If you put it on without wax though, then you can just wipe down the surface with some acetone and that will tack it up to make it adhere the way that it should with the next layer of gel coat. Then for the last layer, it will need to have the sanding agent or the wax mixed in with it. And another pointer when working with any large area with resin or gel coat, you want to make up manageable amounts of gel coat, because if the sun comes out and it gets hot, then the mix will kick off quicker than you can put it on, and you'll be left with a wasted batch of gel coat. So try not to do this if you can. But while you are putting it on, you want to go behind you putting on your non-skid. Depending on how much of a non-skid you want, it's best to put it on thicker, because a lot of it isn't going to stick and will just wash off once the gel coat is dried. Unless you are doing multiple layers, which will help give you a good solid non-skidded floor. Once you're done rolling on your gel coat though, you can go ahead and pull off all your tape and let it dry, leaving you with a project that looks as good as you want it to, based on what you are trying to accomplish. For us, on this boat, we still have some stages left to complete though, but eventually this boat is going to get the entire hull done in a gray color, so our goal is to just get the boat back in the water, which means the next step after the gel coat dries is the fun part of putting all the rigging back on the boat. We moved the rigging tube as far back against the transom as possible by cutting down the rigging tube flange and just running the steering hoses out of the rigging tube from the middle here with this adapter. And then once the engine was rigged, the steering hoses were put back together. We got the batteries reinstalled, the rub rail screwed back into place, and drilled out and rebolted the bracket back to the transom, making the boat pretty much ready for water. The keel was repaired during this entire process as well, but we only got a couple of clips of the in-between stages of that process. It was just fixed using gel coat and this putty here. But after scooping the boat up with the forklift and dipping it back into the water, she got a full tank of fuel and went out for a nice little cruise. And you can also learn how to redo boats like this too by visiting bornagainboating.com.